Hello and welcome to the Filmmaker's Playbook. My name is Jason Branagan and this is a podcast all about filmmaking. My guests this week are Joe Spain and Dave Logan. Joe and Dave are writers and producers. Together, they write and executive produce Harry Wild, which stars Jane Seymour in the title role. Other credits as collaborators include the widely acclaimed adaptation of The Boy That Never Was. Aside from their collaborations, they each have successful solo careers as screenwriters, and Joe's new series Mixtape just won the Audience Award for the TV Spotlight at South by Southwest. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thank you for listening. Joe Spain, Dave Logan, welcome to the Filmmaker's Playbook.
Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, look, to begin, I was wondering whether you could take me on a kind of whistle-stop tour of how you each got started in the industry before you came together and started writing together.
I've been doing this for quite a while now. I just always knew I wanted to write from when I was a little kid. I was 8 years old. I saw Star Wars, went, wow, mind blown. I want to do that. Well, I want to be Han Solo. When I was growing up, there was a show on telly called Clapperboard, which was like the making of movies, and I remember seeing a making of Star Wars. There was the scene when the Millennium Falcon blasts off out of Mos Eisley, and it was like George Lucas was directing Han Solo, and it's like, oh my god, someone tells Han Solo what to do. I want to do that now. And I didn't actually know how to direct, but I did know how to write, so I just started writing. And then I started making short films through my teens, which were just awful, but they were great. I learned loads from them. I started writing feature-length screenplays, working in a video store, and one of my customers was a film director, and he started reading my stuff. He got me my first agent. He got me my first paid work. We worked together for many years now. We won an Emmy together, which was nice. During that I wrote a film called Circus, and that went to ICM in LA for casting. And the talent agent there passed it on to a couple of literary agents who out of the blue phoned me up one day and said, do you want to be represented in LA? And I did. So I said, yes, please. And then I spent sort of the next 10 years doing studio assignments, which were great, really well paid, but kind of soul destroying because nothing was getting made. I worked for people like John Woo. I wrote a couple of films for John Woo. Never got made. I wanted to start seeing the stuff I was writing being realized. So I started moving away from film into TV, and that worked. Harry Wild came along, and that's been very, very successful. And that's where I met you.
I was a nutshell. I was 25 years in a nutshell.
It really was whistle stop, and there's so much, like, I think we could unpack so much of that, and that could be an entire podcast. But I do want to just come back to the TV show was called Clapperboard.
Yeah, Clapperboard. It was around in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. It was brilliant. Chris Kelly.
I'm going to have a look when we're done to see whether it's available.
I bet you it's on YouTube somewhere. So,
Joe.
I guess I came at TV writing kind of differently. When I was younger, like all of us, to be fair, I read everything, and I started writing books when I was kind of single digits in copybooks. And my neighbors used to read them, and I was writing what I was reading, boarding school, mysteries, things like this, usually stuff where there was a lot of food, because I grew up in quite a working class area and I never thought we'd enough food. So all my stories revolved around midnight feasts and adventures that they just stop and eat for a long time. And I was really brilliant with I don't know how I didn't go into writing cookbooks, because I have such a way with words when it comes to food now. But because of the background I grew up in, I just never thought that professional writing was a career that somebody like me had ahead of me. But I knew I was smart. So I went to Trinity and studied politics, which was very rare I grew up in Belcamp, so that was quite unusual. And when I was in there, every lecturer said to me, you have a gift for writing, you should be writing. So when I left college, I started interning in newspapers, which is, I think, where I honed a craft for bringing in a reader in the very first few lines. It's something that it works for both novels and it works for TV. It works for anything if you can bring somebody in a couple of lines. So no wasted years. But I went into Parliament then. I was working for Pierce Doherty, mainly writing speeches and legislation and parliamentary questions. And all through that career, people used to say to me, you have a way with words, you have a way of communicating things that is so accessible, even if it's the most complicated tax policy or anything like that. And I think pretty much around the time of just after that recession, I was the main earner in my house with 3 kids and another one on the way. I was trying to find ways of making more money. I decided to write a book to make more money, which sounds so utterly ludicrous every time I tell it now because, you know, I could have got a bar job or something. But I wrote a novel and it was shortlisted for the Richard and Judy Search for Bestseller the first year they did that competition. And Quercus Publishers in London offered me a 2-book deal straight away on that competition. I'd say straight away, it was about a year later. So I wrote novels for a couple of years and then realised that you can actually, somebody like me can actually write for fun and write professionally, but it's very hard to make money as an author. And that is when I started to think about TV. And initially it was just like, well, could my detective series end up on TV? But then I was like, could I write my detective series on TV? And I had to do that transition that I think most authors really struggle with, where, you know, people say, what's the difference between writing novels and writing TV? And I'm like, it's kind of like being a biathlete. Just because you have fitness doesn't mean you can both swim and cycle. You need to apply the fitness to them in different ways. But I literally just went on YouTube, downloaded and realized you had to write with Final Draft, downloaded Final Draft and started reading all the screenplays online that I could find, like everything in BBC's Writer's Room. I read Happy Valley start to finish. I read The Wire, all of these things that were so well written, they were almost like novels, but in a different way. And that was when I started to realize, like, you know, if you can tell a story, you can tell a story in a novel format or you can tell it in a visual format. And I'd done a couple of things and then I met Dave very well.
Okay. I love that you mentioned BBC Writers' Room. It's just such an incredible resource of tools and access to great writing that I think people are maybe unaware that the library is as big as it is. So then, Dave, it was always going to be screen. I was going to ask you what drew you to screen stories kind of instead of prose, but you've kind of already covered that there. So I guess, how was it then that the two of you came together for Harry Wild? Had you worked together previously, or was that the first time you?
So we were brought together by the producers of Harry Wild. So Joe had worked, they're called Dynamic. They're a French-American company. And Joe had worked for them on a couple of projects before, so they knew of her. We were looking for a second writer for the show, and I was reading script after script after script, writing samples, and I was getting them from my agent. They were coming in through Dynamic, and there was just no one. Harry Wild's, it's a tricky one because every episode is a self-contained murder mystery, but there's also a certain level of humor in it. So I needed someone who was funny, and I need someone who could do thriller, and I just got it. And I was reading scripts, and I was thinking, okay, this guy's okay. He can do he writes a fairly decent thriller, but yeah, the characters are a bit one-dimensional. I'm not loving it. And this one's funny, but yeah, doesn't do drama well enough. And then Klaus, our producer, gave me a script called, what was it called at that time? Once Upon a Time in Lapland. And I read the first page, and on the first page, Santa Claus gets beheaded. And I went, this is brilliant. And I was reading the script, just going, please don't be shit. Please don't be shit. As I was going through it, and I got to the last page, and it wasn't the shit. And at exactly the same time, I think, Joe was reading the pilot episode of Harry Wild and didn't want to co-write a show, and so was reading it going, oh, please be shit, please be shit. And got to the end of it and it's not shit. And so Klaus put us on a call together, and it was a bit of a loving. I was desperate for her to come and write it, and was trying to sell the show to her, and she wanted to write it and was trying to sell her to us. So I think there's some point on that Zoom call we're kind of going, oh, okay, so we just both want to do this show. Let's do it.
Cool. So, Joe, you mentioned kind of working in newspapers, that idea of being able to catch a reader really quickly with Once Upon a Time in Lapland. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. Was that written as a spec to catch people's attention, or were you trying to get that made at the time as well?
No, that was that's one of those shows that's currently in its 6th year of development, which we all have. That was with a Finnish production company. And there's a great producer over there called Jarkko Hentula, and his brain's just insane. And he wanted to move. Finland's quite small, like Ireland, and they realised around the same time as kind of Ireland started doing that, we needed to move towards co-productions to compete with the larger territories like Britain. And he kind of had this idea about somebody coming over and being killed over there, and their family. You know, we've seen that kind of now a few times in different formats. But at the time, for me, this was fascinating because I'd never been to Lapland. And so we were just brainstorming, what does Lapland have and what's the most exciting thing about Lapland? And we had a big fight over Santa Claus because they think Santa Claus is Lappish, and I know that Santa Claus is Turkish and buried in Ireland. So, you know, this back and forth, and we get into it. But that was kind of I guess, yeah, it's the opening lines, but it's the prologue. It's the first 3 minutes of a TV show. So that was the pilot, and I'd done a whole treatment for it. But as Dave was saying, like, I think when you write novels, you're used to writing on your own. And my very first TV show was a co-write, and I found that quite difficult because I think writing is such an individual experience. While at the same time you're writing all of these characters that live in your head, so it's individual and schizophrenic. And to write with somebody is really difficult to explain to them what's going on in your head. You know, can you align your thought processes? So when it came to Harry, I didn't want to co-write into my future. I was like, no, I think possibly I'm better off writing on my own and learning my craft on my own. That's why I didn't want to do it. But from the start, we divvied up episodes in the first season of Harry Wild. So it was like Dave had, you know, created the pilot, and he was writing the bulk of the episodes in that series. But as it went along, I'd said to him, look, you know, if you want me to look over your stuff, if you wouldn't mind looking over my stuff, just to have the feedback before you get to producer level. And we started to learn from each other. But I also realised we could finish each other's thought processes with characters and with scenes, which is something I hadn't been expecting. And I think I honestly went in thinking we'd do a series together, and that'd be a bit of fun and a bit of experience, and, you know, we'd make a great show and earn a bit of money. But then I might go on and do something else. And we've now done 4 seasons of Harry Wild, and we're just starting on hopefully the 5th. And we've written so many other shows together that it's crazy. I'm still trying to break it to him that I think I want to write my own.
In terms of, I would love to dig into then maybe what that early collaboration was like. You alluded to it a little bit there, but I guess, so Dave, you had the pilot written. Harry has that serialized element and that story of the week element. Had you a sense of what a series arc was going to be? Did you have like log lines or ideas for what each episode would be? After you guys spoke, said, yeah, okay, we're going to do this. What was kind of the first step, or what were the early kind of activities in terms of beginning to break what Harry Wild season 1 was going to be?
Well, I had written for Dynamic, I'd written a sort of a Bible of the characters, and part of that included I think it was about 4 or 5 other potential storylines. And Jo took her first episode was based on one of those, and it wasn't a very detailed idea, she did that and then moved on to a second episode, which again she started on one of the ideas, which was about identical twins or something. And at one point we were talking and she was going, "This just isn't working for me. I'm it's not making, this doesn't work in my head." And I just said, "Oh, yeah, you go for it. Just make up one of your own." And she did. And since then, that's all we've done. Yeah. So we've done, we've done now 28 episodes, no, 30 episodes next. We've just written the first 2 episodes of season 5. And we do not necessarily, we start out like this season 5, Joe's done episode 1, I've done episode 2, she's doing 3, I'm doing 4, like that. Sometimes it changes around. It doesn't necessarily end up like that because of things that happen in the episodes, and we go a little bit too, this similar idea there, so you can't have those 2 episodes playing one after the other. But it's fine if that, you move them apart. So Joe will maybe do 2 episodes together, and I'll do 2 episodes together. But it doesn't really matter. We did a lot of talking. We didn't meet. This is the other thing. This was in the end of 2019. We were supposed to start production early in 2020, and COVID happened, so it was all pushed a year. But in that year, we wrote the first series, but I only talked on Zoom.
I think I was very respectful to the fact that Dave had, lived with this character in his head and had written this pilot, because at this point I was 4 or 5 books into the Tom Reynolds series, and I was like, that's it's detective and world. And even though Dave just had a pilot, I know that when you come up with a character and you've lived with them, that they're part of your DNA. And so I had my Tom Reynolds and he had Harry Wild. So I was like, if I suddenly brought Dave in to write a Tom Reynolds book and I had an outline, I'd be expecting him to do this. So I was like, I want to inhabit the character that lives in your head, but you need to help me do that. Like, who is she and what's her world like, and what are these other people in the world like? And I read his script over and over, and he did episode 2 in that first series as well. So I had 2 scripts there to just keep reading, to get used to the cadence of the dialogue and her thought processes and everybody around her. And he'd brought this character in called Welsh Glen, and I'd never written a Welsh character before. And there's a certain way, of how Welsh people phrase things that is very different to how an Irish person would phrase things, and he did it brilliantly. So I was trying to capture that as well. But I think I was also trying to do that. His first episode had kind of he had a loose kind of half a page paragraph, and it could be this. And I was able to take that and run with it. But like he says, on the second one, I was looking at it, and by that stage, I was like, I think I have your characters. You're happy with how I'm using dialogue. You're happy with how I'm structuring plot. But are you happy for me to just start coming up with plots now? Because this one, I don't know where, and I don't know where it's going. Tell me where it's going. And he was like, I don't know where it's going. So if you got another one. Once I got all his characters down pat, and I started trying to, I worked the first episode was based off a kind of a plot idea that Dave had, and I worked that out, and that was fine. But the second plot idea, I wasn't following his thought processes, and I was saying, you'll have to give me more, and he was like, there is no more. I just had kind of a basic premise of an idea, and I was like, well, do you mind if I start coming up with plots on my own? And he's like, that's fine. And then I realized, once we get into those conversations, the what if conversations, and we started going back and forth, I think that was the first point I realized we were going to be able to work as equal co-writers, because we had a respect for, when you sometimes get to a point in a plot and you don't know where it's going, we were able to throw stuff at each other that would take our brains off in different directions. So there was never any writer's block. And I think that was when we both started to see the benefit of, and there's a lot of benefits to having a co-writer, but this was the first time we saw it beneficially creatively, because you could always just say to somebody beside you, what about this? What about this? Oh, that's naff. What about this? And back and forwards. And it also meant that by the time we'd built an idea between us, and by the time one of us had executed a script, when we did get onto calls with producers, of which there are many, always on every project, it was never me or Dave on our own. representing an idea. The two of us represented an idea, and we'd have gone through all the arguments ourselves, all the, around the houses on the different ways that plot could have gone. So when they, as producers are wont to do, would say things like, but what if this happened? We'd be like, oh, no, we've already talked that through. That doesn't work because there's a strength in that. We didn't always win, but there's a strength in the fact that we'd have talked everything through to the end. So, because, sometimes producers can catch on the hop with an idea that's just popped into their brain. But that happened less and less with us, because we were like, well, yeah, we already know, we consider that. Let us tell you why that won't work. So that was one of the first things that really gelled for us as co-writers.
And I think one of the lovely things is sometimes when I've done so many producer calls or meetings on my own, before coming together with Joe, and you do go away and you go, did I understand that note? Because now, having had a bit of time to think about it, makes no sense. And I can now say to Joe, did I get that right? Is that what they meant? And she went, yeah, that's what they meant. So, but that doesn't make sense. No, I know, that doesn't make any sense. And now we can work it out and go back to them and say, okay, we're not going to do that because of this. If we do that, this happens. And, we've worked out, it's really nice having someone you're so in tune with to be able to do that.
It's interesting that you mentioned that idea, Joe, of, chasing things down as far as they can go to figure out what works and what doesn't, because that is something that has recurred when I have spoken to writing or directing kind of partners, that it does seem to be something that's absent from potentially working on your own and getting maybe stuck on an idea and thinking an idea is really good and not chasing it off in as many directions as you possibly could. As you were writing individually prior to coming together, was that something that you were conscious of or that you would actively do, or that particular piece, I suppose, of like really pushing each other in different directions in testing, is that something you think exists predominantly or began to exist predominantly in that kind of partnership space?
Well, I mean, you had a long run partner. John,
John,
your directors.
Yeah, so Joe, I mentioned earlier, that this film director started reading my scripts and got me started, and he and I wrote together for a long time. We'd write something, and then I'd go and write something on my own, and then we come back, and then John and I had lots of projects together, and that writing partnership was fruitful, and it was fun. But I think John and I clashed a bit with I think what we tended to do is, if we didn't agree on something, we would find a compromise that both of us could live with, but probably neither of us loved. And Joe and I never do that. If we disagree on something, we go, okay, then what could it be? And we keep going through an idea after we'll come up with an idea, she'll dismiss it, and vice versa, until we find the thing that we both go, yeah, it's that. And then you discover after a while, that's much better than it was going to be. So that's what I think. That's what we do for each other. It's a very satisfying way of writing. Where I just know it's going to be better than it was starting out.
I think there's, like, in all creative arts, there's a fine line between having a confidence in yourself and what you're doing, and knowing that sometimes what you're doing can be made better with help. And if you don't find the sweet spot for that on TV, it can be very difficult, because I find the difference between publishing and TV. And publishing, generally, what you do first is pretty much how it ends up. Like, your editor might nudge you in certain ways, but for the most part, a novel is the novelist's baby. In TV, you've written this script and you love this script, And sometimes a producer will commission the script because they liked the name of a character in the script or one of the scenes in the script, and then begins the process of them slowly trying to turn your script into their idea of what the show should be. So if you don't have confidence and you meet that producer as a TV writer or even as a director or, you know, anything within our industry, you can be eaten alive. But that doesn't mean that you can go in and go, this script is perfect. Just film it the way it's written. Just produce it the way it's written. It's absolutely brilliant. There's always, you need somebody you can trust to read your material and to listen to your ideas and see your series arc and to look at your Bible and look at the 6th season you have planned in the successful show and say, that all works up to here. And you trust their opinion so much that you will consider. You might still say, no, I'm right, but you'll consider their opinion. And that's something that we have managed to find, which I think is pretty rare in this business.
Do you have a process for giving each other notes, or have you worked together for long enough now that you can just turn to the other person and say, no, that's a shit idea, we're not going there?
It's telepathy.
Joe does say that quite a lot. We'll be having a conversation. Yeah, no, that's shit. And we have a very nice working process. I like it anyway. So when we sit down to start a new series, we go to the pub, and we just sit in the pub and we just talk bollocks at each other for a while. What if it's this? That's all right. Maybe we'll cut. Well, what if it's this becomes something bigger, and that you know afterwards we'll look at our notes and go, yeah, that's probably not a great idea. I think we were drunk by that point, but it's a fun way of doing it, and it feels like there's a lot of energy in it. And then we get sensible. Sit down. The way Harry works is a producer's like a one-pager, so we have to pitch that they can then pass that on to the network and say this is the episode. So far, I don't think the networks have ever turned us down. It seems like every episode we've come up with, they've gone, yeah, fine. And then we turn that into an outline. That's only for the producers. They give us notes. Generally, it's worked. So then we go from the one pager to an outline. We get notes back on that. Most times, I think it's just notes that we can then go straight to script, and deal with it in the script. Couple of times, the producers have had such problems with the episodes. I think it's a couple of mine, one of yours, that we just go, this is pointless. You know, we'll scrap it and start again. Producers, I think there is an inexhaustible supply of ideas. Just murder someone else. We had one note was we got back was this was at the pitch stage. They said these two ideas are too similar, and we were looking at these ideas. They could not be more different, and we were trying to work out why they think these two ideas are similar. And we asked them, and it's like, oh well, that one's set in a pub and that one starts in a pub, and it's like, we can change that. It's
surprise. We film in Ireland. There are pubs.
It's one was it was always going to be a literary tour, but it was going to be a literary pub
literary tour, and
so that was one of Joe's, and so she changed that to it's a literary tour, but it's through graveyards. That's for the series we've just done. So yeah.
But that's the equivalent of our writer's room, how we start a series, just talking like that, but in a relaxed setting. Because I've sat in many writers' rooms where they book a conference room in a hotel, or it's an office in somebody's building, and you're due in at 9 a.m. and they've coffee and pastries, and then you sit down and they go, think. And I'm like, this is not, so I didn't get into, I had an office job. I didn't get into writing to have an office job. That's not why I'm here. It's not, my best ideas are sometimes waking up at 3:15 in the morning going, oh, that, or like I'll be on a run and oh, that. Sitting down and being told to think is not how I write. But when we, sometimes we're walking to the pub to have our first day session and we're like, well, by the time we get in there, we're like, oh, that's solved. Great, let's just get wine. It's a nice way of going back and forth on something before you have to sit down and do the hard work of actually typing it all up.
When you do start to actually write those scripts, then how many drafts do you usually have to go through to get kind of production ready?
That's a production ready is a long question. What we'll do is we'll do a first draft, then read it back. I think we usually give each other the second draft, and then is that right?
Yeah.
And then we'll give each other notes, and we'll do a third draft, which goes to the producers. We'll get their notes, and do a fourth one. But when we're talking about production, I mean, we had, we were running out of colors for each draft last season. It was there's so many.
Tip for screenwriters: never let them lock you too early. Because when we were on Sam and repeat at a certain stage. We were on a show last year together, and that show lost its funding at a certain point, and we were already kind of skating close to it was a 45-minute show that was being sold as an hour, and it was already kind of around the 45-page mark in the scripts, and they were like, so we've just lost a chunk of funding and we need to lose a week of filming, and we've worked out that's about 6 pages per script, and you can't do that with line savers. So by the time you get into, so obviously, which we probably should have said up front, we showrun Harry. So we are involved in all of the prep, everything beforehand. We make it to set as much as we can, but we're normally working over our projects at that stage, but we're frequently on set. But afterwards, we do all the post. So we go through all our edited versions with our director and the producer's cuts. We sit in then for the mix. Dave does the grades and the onlines, and I work with Ray Harmon, our composer, and Harry to take care of the music, and we're there right till the very end. So we know we don't write our scripts, send them in, and that's the end of the project for us. We write our scripts with production and screenwriter minds. So we start probably as screenwriters and we end as producers with those scripts, and it probably sometimes gives us a shorter amount of drafts because we know what we're doing, and sometimes it's a longer amount of drafts because we know what we're doing.
Speaking of that, one of the things I would love to pick your brains on in terms of Harry specifically maybe is tone. And tonally, cold opens tend to be, they could be really, really dark, but they're still played with a lightness that works. And I think I went back and rewatched a couple of episodes before we spoke, but could have been a contender until they chopped his arms off. Like, such a dark way to open an episode. And I'm just curious about how you manage tone on the page initially, and when it came to maybe selling and pitching the show, Dave, were those dark elements like difficult to get commissioners or broadcast people attached? Did they understand them immediately? And if so, like how you achieve that kind of tonal balance?
Yeah, I mean, because I wrote the pilot, and it went out to a few people who didn't get it. It went to so my first movie, Circus, that I mentioned earlier, my producer on that is a guy called James Gibb, who he's a Brit, but he lives in LA now. He and I have been friends since Circus. And I gave it to him, and I think he was at a new company in LA at the time, which he then left, but he took that project with him, and he gave it to Dynamic. That script, I think it's fair to say, never really changed very much. Once James read it and loved it, he got the humor. He loved the characters. and then he gave it to Dynamic, and similarly, there was I think there was a bit in the middle that changed, but it wasn't. It was basically it was the same story, it was the same killer. It was Harry has really not changed very much at all. She was always, a woman who said what she liked and liked what she said. I think is how she was described early doors. The only thing that changed is Jane Seymour doesn't like to smoke, and Harry was a smoker to begin with, so that changed. Jane had no problem with the copious amounts of wine that Harry has to drink, except it's not wine on set, it's some sort of weird grape juice, so she's probably regretting that now. So everyone who came on board sort of got the tone and got the humor. I don't think we've ever had a problem with that.
Oh no. Oh, I'm going to disagree with you there. Yeah. First writer fallout, Jason. We have definitely had moments where, because there's various players, there's producers, and we have an American producer, we have a German producer who lives in France, we have an English producer who lives in America, we have networks. Acorn is the main buyer, and we deal with an English and a Swedish producer in there. We've German ZDF for the second main buyers, and then we've RTE. So there's lots of different people, and there are definitely times where we've sent in an episode and there's been amongst them an incoherency of this is too dark, or this is too funny, or this is too anything. And, we, in particular, one producer would sometimes say, we went through a period of this word making our teeth set. This is a bit too farcical. See, you're remembering that.
Yeah, see, I block all these things out.
Yeah. And it's like, it's so difficult. We went in to meet Red Planet at one point to talk about other things, and they do Death in Paradise. And they said, so how many people are in your writer's room? And we were like, it's just us. And I think we'd done 20 odd. We were into season 4 at that point. So we were into writing the next 8 episodes. And they couldn't believe that the two of us were coming up with a weekly plot. So it's, weekly episodic. So a self-contained plot, 45 minutes. That is both a good plot. You have to have your killer, your red herrings, your, various universes, different atmospheres every time. And doing it where it could be dark and have a sense of humor. And it's easy to look at a show like that and say it's light because it's episodic, but it's far more difficult to write a show like that and keep the audience coming back in the right way. An audience that expects to have humor, but expects to be kind of thrilled, and also then wants to see the kind of soap-like arc of its characters, and to do all of those in a self-contained 45 minutes every week. So you constantly, it's a difficult tonal line to walk. And we think we're walking it fine, but that doesn't mean that every now and again somebody in that large group of people is not going to go, that's actually pitching into too dark now, or too funny, and you have to remind them then that actually we kind of know what the tone of the show is. We know what we're doing at this stage.
We did. Joe's, she's spot on, and I had actually blocked quite a lot of that out, but I think it's because it's changed over time. I think the producers trust us more. We've got a brilliant script editor in Paris. It's called Julie Anthony, who only came on for season 4, and she manages to get the notes from all the other producers, and she collates them, so we're not getting contradictory notes. I think in season 1 there was one episode, I think it was episode 2, and it was, I think this was, if I remember rightly, this was on the outline, which was 10 pages. I got 15 pages of notes. It's like, and they were just notes from everyone, and it's like, okay, I can't do all these because you want this thing, but this thing contradicts that thing that you want, so it's impossible to do. That was a really difficult one to do, which we've kind of got past. I think we're not. It's a yeah. I'm talking about now, I guess, and blocking out the dark days.
Well, I guess that's the show's established. knows what it is, you know what it is. Early doors, though, again, as producers, when you were working with directors, in terms of tone, again, like how important were directors' tonals to ensure that the people you were bringing in to make your show understood the line they had to walk?
Well, our first directors in season 1 were Ronan and Rob Burke, and they got it. They got it straight away. And we're still trying to find projects to work with the lads on, because Ronan in particular, he was the lead director, set a tone for Harry, which we've never deviated from. Just, I don't mean tone of the writing, I mean tone of the look, tone of the performances. Just picking Harry's house and finding the pub that we stage so much of our even episodes in, let alone scenes, all of the main recurring cast. And I think, the show could have gone any amount of ways with different directors, but we found, and it might be, because we're 2 co-writers and they're 2 brothers who direct together, there might have been a nice kind of synergy there that brought us all together, that we are all people who know how to work with other people. And we did find, as that went on, that we started to form a little director-writer alliance, which was very nice. And this is one of my things that I'm always beating a drum about, that producers can be fantastic and they do really good job, and you can't take away from the fact, they're fundraising, they're taking the risk, they're the ones dealing with all of the difficulties. And I mean the big guys. So I don't mean your line producer or your on the ground producer. I'm talking about the guys who put the money together, those kind of execs, who are essentially have a lot of control in our business, because the creatives, the writers and directors don't know how to really get things made with funding, but we know how to get things made with ideas and with execution. And I'm big into writers and directors collaborating more to actually bring stuff to production, because when you rely on the middle guys and the middle guys think they know what they want, you can lose a lot of that tone setting, because they don't get it in the way that, and a different director might have said, I want this to be darker, I want this to be lighter, and we mightn't have agreed with them. But Rob and Ronan and ourselves were a really good mix for that first season.
They were very respectful. They came on, they instantly got it. And that just Ronan, Joe said, was the first. He did the first block, so he made a lot of the choices. But yeah, Rob was the way they worked together. I remember when Rob and Ronan on your show, Ronan said something about when we were picking the pub, he had certain scenes in it, but he knew Rob had an episode that Joe wrote where they're all trapped in the pub and there's a big storm, the whole episode's in it. So he knew Rob was going to need things that he wouldn't need for his episodes.
Like a wind machine.
Yeah, where'd you find a pub with a wind machine?
When we total segue, but when we filmed that episode, for 3 weeks beforehand, it was totally unseasonal 3 weeks of an Irish summer. Just, I mean properly unseasonable. I don't just mean grey. It was rainy, it was stormy, it was everything. Dave had just come back to England, and I said to Rob, I'll call out to the set, and are you comfortable? Because we're trying to recreate a storm in August. I think it was late July, August, and it had actually been a lovely overall summer. It was the one we just came out of COVID. And we had these 2 weeks of lashings of rain. And then the day before we were due to start filming this, the sun came back out. I think the temperatures hit about 29 degrees. And I went on set that day, and Rob had his one shot with his kind of rain, the big barrel of rain they brought, and the wind machines. And he was like, just kind of rocking back and forward, like, oh, don't fuck it up, don't fuck it up, don't fuck it up. And I was there, I just laughed, because when you watch it now, it looks fantastic. But that is where writing and directing have to marry themselves against the elements in a really good way. So
that episode, in fact, when you were speaking, I just remembered that, yeah, Rob really fought for that episode, because the producers didn't. There was like some note about not getting Jane wet. Now Jane, I don't know if you know this story. In season 1, she, I think we were 2-3 weeks into filming, and there was an accident on the set. She fractured her kneecap. She missed about 2 hours of filming. That's it. She was like, she just did everything. She went to hospital. They X-rayed her. She had fractured her kneecap, and she didn't. She was back on set the next day. And there was scenes where, like, we were filming a scene where she had to be, she's thrown to the ground. So we had a brilliant stunt double who looked just like Jane from behind, walked like Jane, everything. So she would do the shots from behind, but Jane's like, yeah, just lower me on the ground, it's fine. That was it. So by the time we came to, that was first block. So by the time we came to second block with this one, they didn't want to get Jane wet. Jane's absolutely fine with that. She thought it's ridiculous. And Rob really fought. He said, you have to, we have to have some exteriors. We have to show the storm. We need, Harry. There was a bit in that episode where they had to go and get someone out of the boot of a car. So you do have to go outside. And he and Ronan collectively really fought for the tone and the style. And then when we got to season 2, Rob Quinn, who's our director again in season 4, came on board, and one of the first meeting, I think he said, the producers asked him, what would you do differently? And he went, well, not a lot. I think it's great. And he just kind of did the same sort of thing that Rob Ronan did. Emma Conroy, who did season 3, the same. We've been really lucky with the directors on this show.
Joe, you mentioned that setting up the tone, not just visually, but from a performance perspective as well. So I think it's really hard to imagine Harry not being Jane Seymour. I was wondering kind of at what point did Jane's casting come about, or Dave, did you always have Jane in mind, or like how did it materialize, and then how that began to maybe shape or change who Harry was, if at all? You mentioned obviously Harry no longer smokes, but was there other things that Jane brought that you didn't initially see when you created that character?
It was Jane quite early on. That came through James Gibb in LA. He suggested her. She was in London she was doing a BBC show, and she and I went and had lunch together. And I think I said something like, I'd written the pilot already, and I said, this is my Harry, the one on the page. Now you have to make her your Harry. She completely got the character. There's a big speech Harry makes at the beginning of episode 1 when she's leaving Trinity, and she's talking to all her students, and that sort of summed up Harry. And Jane completely got it. She loved it, and I think we've as we've gone on, Harry's not changed particularly. She's like we were all the same as Joe when she read it. Completely got Harry, got the characters. Jane did too.
I think that the characters not changed, but one of the things we did in season 1, and we've continued to do it, but now we kind of do it just without even thinking. We started doing read-throughs with the cast ourselves weekly with what was coming up, the core cast, because obviously we got a lot of, we've a standing joke at this point. If you've not been hired as an actor in Harry Wild, like, where are you? If you just turned 18, we'll have you. Because it's weekly episodic, and there's so many pools we can go into. In fact, at one point, I remember Rob Burke saying to me in season 1, I think your guys are going to run out of actors with this show. But more keep coming, and they're brilliant. But with the core cast, we used to sit down with them. We'd go over to Jane's on a Sunday or a Saturday, and we sit outside and we'd have a lunch, and we would read the scenes of the week ahead. And, we'd said to Rob and Ronan, we want to do this because one of the things we both have as writers is that the intonation of something can be different between written and saying. Like, it's three people can read the same line 3 different ways. And we wanted our actors to know what the intonation of our sentences were, in, surprised or shocked or upset or bland or whatever it was. But we also wanted to see them And over that first season and the second season, we started to do a hybrid of writing the characters that we'd had in our head and writing the actors who play them, which is a real luxury on a recurring show. And it kind of means then when our directors come in, because the actors are a recurring cast, we're kind of blessed with them, because I've heard horror stories of certain actors. Jane is a class act. She is Hollywood, but she is also got her feet on the ground, and she likes to have a happy set, and she sets the tone. Like nobody can come in to that set and be prima donnas, because the woman who's entitled to be a prima donna isn't, and they're all in awe of her. And all of the younger actors that came on to form that family all take her lead. So we, sometimes they say, I don't understand why the character's doing this, or why are they saying this, and we'll either explain it to them or we'll adjust it a little bit, because we're not that precious either. We're like, as long as this is correct and the plot is correct and the logic is there, if you want to say this another way, tell me how you're saying it. I mean, if it's not English, we won't use it, but for the most part, we're collaborative. And then it means with our directors, we're saying this cast is really responsive. And one of the things that they like, and I think the Burke started this, but it's continued with every director since, is that the cast like to have their freebie when they're doing a take. So they'll always do it kind of as the director wants, as is written. And then they'll give it a bit of welly or a bit of their own personality in their freebie take. And we're always like, once you get the lines, you guys, once we have the lines, if you want to mix it up a little bit, that's fine, because if it works brilliant. But if it doesn't, we have the lines. So it's that nice. I think we're in a luxurious position going into a fifth season of something to have that core group, and it is really family. But it means we work with all our creatives as well.
Amazing. I was going to ask about your casting process as showrunners and how involved you are in that kind of episode to episode and casting all the kind of your core cast exists, but all of the featured cast around that, and whether you enjoy the casting process.
From season one, all the main cast, we were in on all that, picking who is going to be, and they were brilliant. The week to week stuff, we will get the director and the casting director's top choices. Now, sometimes that is one person, and I always make a point of saying, one is not a choice, and we push back. And if we push back, they always listen. Sometimes they disagree, and sometimes they're right, and sometimes we're right. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of people we weren't happy with, and we were right. They weren't quite right for the. We have a different. We know who these characters need to be. I'd say 9 times out of 10 when that happens, Rob Quinn, who's our current director, he's very easy to work with, and goes, okay, you guys know, we'll keep looking. So I think you answered too, Joe. I think we're mostly happy.
Yeah, we generally, I mean, particularly the weekly episodes, you have to bear in mind how much cast a show like this goes through, because you might have, we had a producer at one point called Michael Queen for the first 3 series, and we always laugh because Michael Queen had this thing of like, can there not just be 4 suspects in every episode? he liked to keep his cast level budget at a certain point, and we were like, oh Michael, it's starting to get to the point with the formula of this show. So we need, maybe this week it's 3 and this week it's 6. Let's just average it out. But it does mean, like, for any given character or in any given episode, you're looking at possibly 9 or 10 new cast, and then the smaller parts, and we never get too worried about the smaller parts. But Dave's right. I mean, there was a character in season 1 in one of Dave's episodes, and he had to be like a big, really intimidating guy, and Dave kept referencing Ed.
The what? The Mindhunter. It was Ed
Kempler.
Kempler.
Yeah, and the big serial killer. And the cast that was being put forward on that wasn't right. And then they sent us in a group of people, Peter Claffey. And I remember we both emailed each other, and Dave was like, trying to email and ring at the same time going, that guy, that's the one. And they'd got it, you know, but we'd had to go back to them 5 or 6 times with the various cast suggestions going, it's not that, it's not that, it's not that. And then we knew, and they knew too, that he was magic. And he's now obviously gone on to do great things, you know, but he played a really intimidating serial killer that we wanted back in multiple episodes because he was so good. But
that was one that was one of the ones I had to change. I think I tried twice to get him back and wrote episodes, and the producers don't like that. They don't like characters coming back as much as we do. So.
Do you think that is to do with or why do you think that is? Is it kind of, does it break the grammar of the show in some way, and the weekly kind of mystery, or?
That's probably what our producers would say. We think that when you invest in long run shows like this or long running detective series, our feeling is that the audience like a character to come back as a surprise, and that their memory is long, and they really are acolytes of this show. Like there's acolytes of Jane and there's acolytes of this show, and they're not going to object, in our humble opinions, to a character that they loved in an episode coming back as a surprise or a twist or something in a later episode. Or sometimes, you know, it's not their fault, because networks can be like this as well. Producers and networks are very formulaic, and they're no, this works.
So Jane, I'm sure you've seen Somewhere in Time, the film she did with Christopher Reeve, and it's about like 1980 or something. She does a thing. She's done a thing every year. There's this big hotel in, where is it?
Some island, and
it's somewhere in America. They have that. It's where they shot Somewhere in Time, and she does this thing where she goes back, and people pay a lot of money to come and meet her and go to the places that they used in there. This year, she decided, let's do something different. Let's do the same thing in the same place, but it'll be about Harry Wilde. And it costs a fortune. You've got to take like 3 planes to get to this place. And people, her fans, like they came over from Germany and, you know, all over, it was like, what, 4-day event, all about Harry Wilde. They're like, yeah, there was a costume, fancy dress dinner or something.
Murder mystery dinner party.
Mystery dinner party, you know, and a screening of episodes, and there was an interview with Jane. People, you know, spending a fortune, coming from all over the world to come to this, which is,
we keep talking about them. We keep saying to them, do some merch, do some Harry dollies.
Right idea. Harry aside, I would love to get your sense on The Boy Who Never Was, and that being an adaptation, and how that process maybe differed from the freedom of kind of Harry being something that you created, Dave. And Joe, particularly coming from novels and literature, was any kind of nervousness about adapting someone else's work and in that space?
A nervousness about adapting in general, and I still have it, because I think it is it has its pros and cons. When you do an original, it's all on us. You know, we get to come up with lots of ideas. We get to then have to deal with producers who think because it's an original and because it's not cemented, they can also help. So there's pros and cons like that. When you're adapting somebody's book, you are trying to, and I think, so I get sent them all the time, because now I live in that nice space between being an author and being a screenwriter, and I do both of them at a level that people are like, she knows what she's doing. So I've one called Mixtape that's coming out this year, and Binge Foxhell, which again was on a book. And then we did The Boy That Never Was, and I'm doing another one for RT as well. And we're doing my own. So one of my books we're actually doing as producers with, we're doing a deal with Metropolitan to be our, we're the commissioning producers and they're going to be our producers. And again, for kind of Irish international market, but it has its limits as well, because you want to respect what's in the book while also knowing that what happens in most people's heads is that they think, this is a great book. that'd make a great TV show. And they are slicing the 360 pages 6 by 60. There you go. There's your 6 episodes. And that's not how it works. You've got to take the kind of the premise of the book, the characters of the book, and do them justice, and then turn it into a screenplay. And the vast majority of books don't work well as screenplays and are really difficult to transpose on screen because, and it's not just obviously a book with more dialogue is fantastic because it means there is something happening and there's stuff being exchanged, because those books where there's an inner monologue all the time are nigh on impossible to even imagine executing. But there's also books that they rely on a subterfuge of psychology. There's a narrative that's working against the reader that's difficult also to put on screen. But I think on top of all of that, so I insist now that my credit on screen when I'm adapting a book is created for TV by, because it's so different. And when you've done all that work, you want to be credited with it. So you're not just adapting a book, you're actually creating a story for TV based on a book. And I insist on it, having seen Slow Horses, which is based on the McCarran books. And I think those books are fit for screen. I think he actually wrote them for screen. They're so brilliant. But the screenwriter, and he does an exceptional job of faithfully adapting those books, has created for TV by. That's his credit. So once I saw that, I was saying today, we're not doing this ever again without created for TV by, because there's such a weight of responsibility put on your shoulders. And then, and you do all of the work that you do with an original. And then when it comes out, the credit's shared. And that, I respect that as an author. They own the IP. But I also do say to authors, adapt your own work.
The Boy That Never Was, it was it's a little while since I read the book, but it's each chapter is told from Harry or Robin's point of view,
3 parts, yeah,
and then something else, at the end, which I won't, no spoilers in case people haven't seen the show or read the book. But that was very difficult. You can't just adapt that directly. And there was something in that book that both of us really responded to. And that was our starting point. So the characters Harry and Robin did change from the book. I think that's fair. You've met
Karen Glees, yeah, Karen Glees and Paul Perry had written the book. I met Karen, and she is so grateful, because that book was there for a long number of years, which will tell you how difficult it was to actually get that adapted for screen, because there is a central premise to that book, which is brilliant. And when Sabotica came to me, I went to Dave and I said, look, there's a lot in this book that I know you're going to read and go, that doesn't work for screen, Joe, it doesn't work. But trust me, hang on to the plot twist, essentially, and you'll love it. And that's what I'd like to see on screen. And we'd changed so much, but Karen was so respectful. She was like, I know, I understand why you had to do this. And her career is as an author. She's, I don't think she's screenwritten anything anyway, but on this one, she was saying, I've done my job. You do your job to make it what it needs to be, which was a dream collaboration. That is not always the case. And I have done some projects which shall remain nameless with authors who shall also remain nameless, who have not one iota of gratitude for what you've done, which essentially makes them an awful lot of money.
I want to talk about what you guys have coming up together, but before we maybe get there, I know that you each have solo projects that you are working on and work on as well. Joe, you mentioned Mixtape. I was wondering, how do you decide kind of what you're working on together versus what maybe to do individually? Or is that something that is there a process, or is it just something comes and that we're both doing this?
Well, I can answer that because my answer is much quicker. I don't work on anything without Jared out. So I've got a film that is in development and has been for 12 years or something, which was gearing up to, we had a director and lead actor, and we were gearing up to shoot that, and that our lead was offered a big Amazon show, and he went and did that, and then that was renewed for a second season almost immediately. and our director went off to do a Netflix film. So, so basically, I'm just doing projects with Jo. She's the one who's got a life outside
See,
of me.
he's massaging the narrative there because he is doing this film for about 12 years. And in the midst of that, I have taken on solo projects to keep me busy. So most of the things that I've done, I took on when it looked like Black Circle was going to go. And I did get to the point, so I've never done a film. And working with Dave has turned me off the idea of doing film. And I think I might be, I know my TV agents tell us all the time that the industry is constricting right now. I did my first show in 2018 and I've done 1 to 2 shows every year since. And part of that is because Harry is recurrent, but also I've just had a look these shows. So I'm constantly working on stuff that then goes to green light and then gets made. And during that period, there was I think about 2 years ago or a year ago, Dave was doing these weekly calls on this film, which was just about to go, which had been going for 9 or 10 years. And I was like, oh, are you all excited? Will I go buy a dress for the red carpet? And he's like, hold your horses there. It's not how film works. And he was right, because it just kind of like stopped again. And I was like, your patience for this is incredible. And film seems to be so much harder. Just so much harder. I know TV can be hard, but like film just makes it look like a walk in the park. So that's why I've got individual projects, because Dave does TV and film, and I do TV.
I do it less and less. There was a project I had once. It was called The Rip, with the late Roger Michelle was directing it. It's for working title. We had Jake Gyllenhaal attached to star. And so that I think I got that call that Jake had signed on at the end of a week, and it's like, wow, that weekend was very exciting. And then they got into the casting the leading lady, and it was because it was working title. It was Universal time. Universal wanted one person. Roger wanted someone else. Working title wanted someone else. They couldn't agree, and we've got Jake and a fully funded film. I then got a call from Roger going, can't do this, I'm afraid, I'm leaving the project. And he left, Jake left. It went from 1 weekend going, yeah, to, oh, it's all gone away. And I had worked on that for years. I'd written it before Roger came on board. Roger and I spent about 2 years working on that. And it just went away in one phone call, and that's so frustrating. And that was one of the what I was saying earlier about I need to see things made, and so TV is much better. I would love to do something, but Jo and I have got Jo particularly is like every time we talk, she's come up with a new brilliant idea. It's like, well, what if we did this? It's like, never seen that before. We should absolutely do that. We've got a list, this long. So I would absolutely love to do something solo, but when?
Sorry.
Yeah, that's brutal about The Rip and Black Circle, though. Film is just so...
I've got another 30 of those.
Oh, yeah, it's really, really tough. I actually had a similar conversation about features yesterday, and just the idea of it taking 10 years is probably a good turnaround, and from when you create or write that first version or that treatment or whatever it is to when you potentially, like, in a decade, hopefully you've done a lot of growing. You're an entirely different person by the time you actually get to make the thing that you created at a different stage. It's wild, and not brilliant financially. Okay, what is something that let's say, about kind of screenwriting specifically today, that you wish you knew at the beginning of your careers?
Well, that's a good question.
See, I think because I'm only doing this since 2018, I still think I'm learning all the time. I like, sometimes I mean, I think I know it gets better because I sent an episode in Harry there the other day and I got back minimal notes. I've done the same with a second episode in RTE thing, just minimal notes, which means I'm already kind of operating at a level. I think, well, I can answer the question about writing in general. One of the things that I think I already kind of knew, um, and sometimes this is inherent to you or it's not. And I'm not sure it can be taught, but it's something that I still say to myself when I sit down with a blank page and I say to everybody who asks me, can they have a conversation with me about writing? Writers just write. They just write. Blank pages shouldn't intimidate you. And once you've started writing something, you're halfway there and you'll get it finished. And then all of the work is in the editing. I think because I just wrote my first book out of nowhere, that was somewhere in the back of my head. But I didn't write that first book till I was 35. And now I think I could just be really wealthy now. If I started at 20. It took me that long to sit down and do that. So maybe I'm in a roundabout way answering your question. That is a completely different question. If I could go back to my younger self, I would say just start writing right now, as opposed to later. But with screenwriting, I think I'm still learning.
But I wouldn't say that to my younger self because I was very young when I started writing. But I'm still learning. I learned from Jo, the way she does something, or I'll go, that's cool. But I also I learned from other writers. I think this isn't necessarily answering a question at all, but advice that I did do it when I was starting outside. This isn't answering your question. I'm sorry, but read screenplays. We were talking about the BBC writers' room earlier, but when I was starting out, I found an advert in the back of, I don't know what it was, Starlog or Empire or something like that, about this company that sold screenplays, and I was spending a fortune getting photocopied screenplays of Godfather, Chinatown, Silence of the Lambs, whatever it was, which are all online now, and sort of were then as well. I didn't find them, so I lost a small fortune in that. But I read good screenplays and bad screenplays. And you learn so much from seeing how other people, especially if you pick a film or TV show that you love, like you were talking about Happy Valley. I Godfather's my favorite movie, so I devoured that. I think Silence of the Lambs is brilliant. Back to the Future is brilliant. I read all these, and and analyze it. I was such a nerd. I'd break films down into a scene by scene. So why has the director and the writer done it like this? I break things down into shots. Back in the when I was much younger and had a lot more time because people weren't paying me. It was I was analyzing stuff, and you've had it. You said this on your show before. Rewrite. I remember when myself and John Hay were writing something, John found a quote from John Cleese. So I can't remember it verbatim, but it was something along the lines of he said I'm really proud that when we were working A Fish Called Wanda, which I think is a tremendous film, we did whatever it was. It was 10 major rewrites. That was 18 polishes, whatever. It was rewritten and rewritten and rewritten until it was as good as it could be. And I learned that from a really early age. So I apologize for not answering your question. I can't think of something that I
apologize, Jason. Sorry.
I think everything you said is really valuable in terms of something from now that would have been really valuable to know earlier on in your career. I think we hit tons of points there. Just actually sitting down and writing, putting words on paper and doing it. And the value
something that has just occurred to me is I didn't have any idea about how to deal with other people, producers. I wish I had. When you get notes, we now tend to this is again something I've heard in a show. People say a lot, the note behind the note. Producers aren't writers unless they're writer producers, but most of the time they're not doing our job because they can't. I wouldn't be very good at raising finance. That's not where my particular skill set lies. But if they're giving us a note, and it's like we going back to that thing, me saying to Joe, does this note make sense? Sometimes they don't make sense because they're not entirely sure what it is they mean. They just know something's not working. And I think when I was starting out, I was trying to make everyone happy. My very first studio job in Hollywood was for Warner Brothers, Village Roadshow, and Chula Donna. And it was an adaptation of the book, never got made. But this was my trial before. I walked into a room on the Warner Brothers lot, and it was quite a big room, and there was 9 chairs in a semicircle, and 1 chair facing that 9, because each of those Warner's, Village Roadshow, and Chula Donna each put 3 execs on it. And I was there, and I had to pitch to 9 people. It was scary as anything, but it got the job. Then it didn't get made. I then spent a long time trying to please those 9 people, and you can't. Not everyone. I know. I think the note I got back from the head of production at the time from Warner's was a woman called Courtney Valenti, and her note, and she was kind of out of the process most of the time, because she was the big boss. And when she finally got the script, her comment was, "This doesn't really feel like a Dave Obers. We hired him for a reason." And and she was right. It wasn't. I had been trying to please all these people, and somewhere along the way lost me.
I think so now we're answering your question. The note behind the note, that's something that David said to me earlier, and it immediately clicked in my head because I'd been through a few experiences beforehand. And I think it's something we touched on earlier. There's a very fine line between knowing your worth and letting somebody else determine your worth. And I had some very bad experiences at the start of screenwriting where from producers telling me what their idea of the show was, which was like a premise. There's no serial arc. There was no start, middle, and end. It was just like and I'd love to see this scene where they all end up sitting in a kitchen. How are they getting there? Why are they there? What's happening? Because I think like a storyteller, to dealing with script editors who saw me as a new writer, and who were frustrated writers themselves. And I'm like, dealing with them on the same level, thinking we're on the same level. And that's not to be disrespectful to what a script editor is doing, but ultimately a script editor is there to help the writer get to the script and to help communicate producers' notes and not to write the script themselves. Otherwise, they should do that job. And I think it took me a long time, and it was when Dave said that was the note behind the note, to both understand that in the reading of them, but also to learn to question a note. Because we get so much in this industry, but you don't have to take every single note. And I think we both got to this good point of reading through notes, being able to really quickly put aside the ones that are easy, doable, understandable, putting the ones that we don't quite understand into a different box, and then putting the ones that we have a problem with into another box. And so you're asking for clarification or communication on them. But it's okay to come back to somebody on a note and say, what do you think you mean by that? As opposed to you trying to find the answer to their completely incomprehensible note, which they, because they don't even understand what they're asking for themselves, might go, yeah, that's what I meant. And you've done all the work to come up with what they think they meant, but actually they didn't. And that's just confidence. That's confidence that comes, I think if we went back and said that to ourselves, you'd still go through all those painful processes. But when you've done it for a long time, you grow the confidence. And you also grow the back package. You have so much stuff made, you have so many credits, you have so much work to your name, that they are less confident in saying to you, I think it should be this. And I can't really explain it why. But it's for every creative in our business. Like one of the things I do with Harry is I take all of the music notes from the producers. And because I'm a musician, I filter them and give them to Ray Harmon like music notes. So I make his job easy. Whereas some of our notes, like when you see them in the raw draft, it's things like, we've had producers say, I'm not sure I'm liking that plinkety plonk bit, whatever that bit's called. And it's just like it's making the note respectful.
We with the music thing, I remember in season 1, there was Joe was listening to a bit of music, and she's playing it back, and she's going, "What's he used there?" And she went, "Oh, it's an instrument I've never heard of. I can't even remember what it was called. It was some Middle Eastern flute or something." She's got this ridiculously cute ear that, and she and Ray get on really well, and Ray's just he's just the lovely.
But I think I say it's the same for you as a director, Jason. Like I know our directors are the same. We try to we take all of our exec producer notes, and we filter them and give them to the director in a way that is, it's speaking the director's language. Because otherwise they're going to get 55 pages of notes from the different producers, and why should anyone live through that pain is our motto.
But also because this is on Harry, been through the whole process. There's some things that we get from producers who've not been party to it. We know why it was done. We know it can't be changed. We get the dailies every day. When it comes to the edit, we usually go in and watch the director's first cut, give them notes. Then we watch it again at home, and because I've got all the dailies, I can go back and look at what we shot that day. So something's not working. When we're on set, tend to remember. And there's a new character who comes into season 4, and we were there that day on her first day, and Joe was like, she said that a different way. She said she has a much better take of that. And so we go back and we'll find that much better take, and then we can say, can you try it with take 4 or whatever. And Rob is very, very accommodating. He never says no. He goes, try it. And sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes we're right. So it's a nice, well, you can't whisper we're never wrong. No one will hear it.
I was trying to whisper it so it wouldn't go on the podcast.
We'll cut that. I think, though, what I get, even earlier on when you mentioned that specific episode about these episodes are too similar, I get a sense of you just have to be really proactive in engaging with the note too, and not just, I think you can get notes and be passive, go through them, try and deal with them, but that, again, turning them into a collaborative part of the process to find the best way out of them.
There's a realism. Like The Boy That Never Was is an example of a show that was made in a tight budget between 2 countries, with cast in both countries and 2 different sets of producers, and very difficult. And there was a budgetary realism to those notes and those notes conversations, because at the point when Subotica are saying, look, we have to cut this from filming, we can't just become writers at that point who are just like, no, how dare you take your hands off our material. We all agreed these scripts. We're on draft 79, leave that scene alone. And I think that it's the benefit of being showrunners that we can have those very frank conversations of something that we've been fighting them for 6 months on, suddenly because the budget's actually collapsed, is the first thing that we're going, do you know what, let's just get rid of that storyline.
we did. So on that one, I remember that meeting, we were in the office, and our director was there and producer was there, and they all looked really nervous because they had to tell us, this funding had just backed out and they'd lost this big chunk. And I think if I remember this correctly, so I don't seem to remember anything that's happened. You're correct. We just immediately went, okay, yeah, and like Joe said, it's like our first suggestion is, what if we just lost that entire storyline?
You could just see, you're remembering it correctly. You could see all of their bodies just going, oh.
I think they're all tense, ready for an argument, and just go, look, explain to us why this has to happen, because they just can't afford it. I think
those notes you have to understand as a professional writer. You cannot be just a professional writer who hands over scripts and says, make that happen for me. Not in this business, not in this kind of budget, not in this country. But on other notes, we're doing one of my books with an unnamed production company. And at one point, one of the younger producers in that company said,
Development executive.
What if this other person in the book was a killer? And my feeling with books is there are no what ifs when it comes to the adaptation of a book plot. If there's a what if, don't option the book. Because and it's not just because it's my book. I'd have said the same if I was adapting somebody else's book. That's the plot, that's the victim, that's the killer. If you want a different plot, different victim, different killer, write your own story or adapt a different book. Because why? Why is that one better? So those kind of notes, I'm like, I've run out of, I'm getting old and intolerant for that kind of note. Because I'm like, just go be a writer. Stop telling the writers how to do their jobs. You just go be a writer.
Yeah. I have two more questions for you. So one, I wasn't actually something I thought of, but Dave, because you would mention that pitch, I was wondering, for each of you, if you had like one top tip for writers who are potentially facing like their first couple of pitches or going in and trying to like sell an idea, what's the top tip you have for pitching stories?
Don't be nervous. You're in that room probably for a reason. Yeah, have faith in your material. And I would also say, this just popped in my head. I think everything I have pitched over the years that I ended up getting has an cool moment where you're pitching it and the person you're pitching to goes, oh, cool. Like you just, because pitching pictures, puts a picture in their head of something brilliant they've not seen, you've probably got the job. It helps if the general idea is good and makes sense, but it's yeah. I think this is a visual medium. If you suggest something that they want to see, you've probably got the job.
For emerging writers who maybe are like really hungry to get an agent or think an agent holds the key to making the next step in their career, it's probably not just specific to writers. I think anyone in film, an agent feels like suddenly you're going to get lots of work. What advice would you have, or how have agent relationships changed or not changed your careers at different moments?
My advice would be to rethink that notion. We get all our own work. People now, at certain points, go to our agents and ask us about work because we are already well known. But at the very start of your career, the reason it's important to have an agent is to do your contracts and to make sure you're protected. In my experience, and I have a fantastic agent and a fantastic relationship with him, and he is a bulldog when it comes to contracts. He protects me so well. He doesn't get me work. I get me work, and my work gets me work. And I am, I do my work efficiently and I do it well. Everybody needs their break. It mightn't necessarily be the agent that gets you a break. It might be a production company. If you've sent scripts in or a pitch in, it might be that production company already saying, we'll actually get this made for you. Then you need your agent because you need somebody presenting you and taking care of your contracts. The idea that if you just go to an agent and give them a script and a pitch, agents are not producers. They can represent you well. They can mention your name around the place. But in my experience, and maybe other people are different, my agents never got me a job that I haven't already been in the lineup for. And that is by virtue of how much I work, the quality of the work, how the work is received. When I meet broadcast commissioners and when I meet producers, I'm, friendly and efficient and creative. And these things just start to pay off. And also I'm very good at my job. But yeah, I wouldn't be putting all my eggs in I want to be a writer. And if only I could get an agent. Because if you want to be a writer, you'll just be a writer. But you'll need an agent to do your contracts at a certain point.
I think for me, when I was starting out, agents did get me work. When the studio stuff, they were putting me up for it. Then I'm in a room and I have to secure that. I'm not getting a job just because the agent has said, "Oh, Dave's nice, give him a job." They you need to see an agent for what they are, and it's a business. They're there to make money from us or from directors or whoever. They're running a business, so they're looking for a client who is going to be able to do business. So don't if you write one script, I've come across people who've written a script and gone, "Will you give this to your agent?" I was going to say I won't, because I'll say, why? It's because that agent wants to know that you can do this again and again and again and again. And our agents are absolutely brilliant. In fact, they were here this week. They flew over to Dublin because we, as Joe mentioned earlier, we're writing and producing The Trial, which was her last published book. She's written one since. That's not out yet. And they flew over so we could all sit down together with Metropolitan, our co-producers, and work out how we're going to do this, and what we need to do, what they need to do, to facilitate that. And so they're both, Rob and Will are great. Rob's mine and says, they're that's a pretty good thing to I mean, we bought them lunch. They didn't fly all the way to Dublin for nothing. They're great. They when negotiating, people don't want to pay you. they which is absolutely understandable, but we don't agree with it.
You're more likely to get an agent when somebody is willing to pay you, because at that point the agent's coming in and taking the commission. And that's why I think when people say to me, I've written a script, I'm like, you want to start writing your next idea and your next idea and your next idea, because in our business at any given time you don't know what's going to be greenlit. So we have 5, 6, 7 balls on the go at any time, and I also have books, and that's why I'm productive. People are like, "Oh, you're prolific," and I'm like, only because I'm productive. If I just did one show, if I just wrote one script a year and wait for that show to be made, I'd still be waiting. But I'm like, write all your scripts, write all your ideas, keep going and keep sending them to production companies, to producers, to look at things like if Ortiz doing that, they call it storyboard, things like this, where there are ways into the industry that you have to Google and do all your research on. And what you shouldn't do is not write anything and then contact me and say, "Can I have a chat with you about writing?" Because I do not respond well to that. I've had them my whole life, my whole published writing life. And I'm like, "What have you written?" "Well, I haven't written anything yet because I'm a really busy person." Oh my God, I have 4 children and I had a full-time job when I started writing. So come back to me in 2 years when you've written something. But that would be my advice to anyone who is writing. Write more. Look at all of the interesting ways into the industry, like creative opening things, where Screen Ireland sponsor things, sponsor development funding for young writers and diverse writers and things like that. And then get somebody interested and wanting to commission a script from you or buy a script from you, and then get your agent. And they'll all be hungry at that point to talk to you.
Love it. That all tracks.
Yeah.
Harry Wild season 4, do we have a TX date? Do we know
not
when?
yet. Probably
finished post.
We finished post in April. So we will. I'm guessing it'll be sort of late summer. We never know when RTE are going to show it. They seem to show it, whenever they choose. I don't think they are. I don't think they've shown season 3 yet.
I think so. I think they've season 3 out.
But
I have then Mixtape is airing in May with Binge Foxtel in Australia, but it's having its premiere at South by Southwest in March. So we'll find out who are this side of the hemisphere who's buying that, and hopefully I think that's going to be really big.
And you mentioned then you're adapting The Trial?
this is our sort of big project for this year, along with season 5 of Harry. We're going to produce that, so we're all in on that one. And we're adapting Don't Look Back, which for another company, which is Joe's. Was that 12? Well, one of Joe's books.
Yeah.
So that's underway, and
That's actually that reference back to what I just said. If we were to list the things that we're currently doing, it's when will they come out? So that's why you have to have so many things on the go at any given time.
and we also do things. We approach things differently. The Boy That Never Was, we weren't that involved. After writing it,
We just
we just left them to it.
I mean, after 70 drafts or so, we left them to it.
But we were available, and they if they needed something, we had a brilliant script editor for that, Beth Evans, who she took over a lot of the stuff that we don't need to do. We don't if something has to be changed because of a location drops out, or some technical thing, or an actor wants to change a line. Beth was more than capable of doing that. She saved us so much work. She's great. But we didn't go into the edit on that one. We just we'd moved on to,
you can't show on everything,
other things. It takes a long time. And Joe's point, because we did they offered to let us direct a block of the last season of Harry Wild, and we toyed with the idea until we discovered the financial side of that, and we would be actually losing money by directing, and it would also mean we're not writing. We can still, we can go to set, be on set for a few hours, and then go home and write. So I don't think, and also it's also harking back to what Joe said. She's worked real jobs. I've never had a real job in my life, but she had to get up at a certain time and be in a certain place, and directors work hard now.
You really work hard, Jason.
I get a sense though that you guys are really good at prioritization.
I think I'm exceptional at it's from working the real job. When I wrote that first book, I was working in Leinster House and living in Blanchardstown and going in. So I was doing 11-hour days with commuting, thrown in and coming home to 3 small children while pregnant, writing another book. So my time management skills are exceptional. That's why I can't cope with people telling me they're busy people. You're not.
Jo can also, she can write anywhere. I've got photos of her. Did you start writing book 14? Her latest book? I've got a photo of her. She was on set. She just found a corner, and I think the book.
I finished the last book.
You finished it, yeah. So it just sits there. I can't do that. I need peace and quiet, and some writers will have to find the right bit of music to be playing for while they're writing. I can't have any noise, any sound.
We're filming scenes, and the way they keep moving you around, so you're not in anywhere on that thing. And I was like, for the love of God, can I just be an extra at a table typing away? I'm writing a fucking book here, people.
That's brilliant. I love it.
We were extras in the end of season 3, and we're never doing that again.
For all of our knowledge of this game, Jason, we did one take, and I went, "That's great. Can we go?" Dave's like, "No, we're here for the day, Joe."
Yeah. Many moons ago, I brought my nanny in to be an extra when I was on a block of Fair City, and she was so bored so quick.
I think you must have loads of our cast have been in Fair City.
Yeah.
Lots of them.
Tons of them. Yeah. Joe, Dave, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Candidly, I think there's tons and tons of really great insights, and just It's so great to kind of get behind what your process is and how you work. So thank you for sharing. And that is a wrap on Joe Spain and Dave Logan. Thank you for listening to the Filmmaker's Playbook. If you're enjoying the show, please share it with friends and rate us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It's a great way to support the show.